Have you ever considered the possibility that the most outwardly charitable individuals might harbor the deepest disdain for those they deem beneath them? This is a story that peels back the layers of wealth and social standing to reveal a chilling truth about the human heart, a truth that will ultimately lead to an unexpected and perhaps unsettling reckoning. Prepare to witness the stark contrast between public perception and private reality, and how the seeds of contempt, once sown, can yield a harvest of unforeseen consequences. This narrative will delve into the intricate dynamics of power and prejudice, exposing the fragility of social hierarchies when confronted with the enduring strength of familial bonds and the quiet dignity of those who are often overlooked and underestimated. The late afternoon sun cast long, elegant shadows across the gleaming marble floor of Eleanor Whitmore's impeccably designed kitchen. It was a space that spoke of affluence and meticulous order, a testament to Eleanor's exacting standards in all aspects of her life. Yet, in this pristine environment, a palpable tension hung in the air, a silent testament to the unequal power dynamic that permeated the household. Martha Johnson, a woman of quiet strength etched onto her middle-aged face, moved with practiced efficiency. Her hands, though bearing the marks of hard work, handled the delicate china with care. Today, however, her usual composure faltered for a fleeting moment. A sudden, slight tremor in her hand caused a delicate porcelain teacup, part of Eleanor's prized collection, to slip from her grasp, shattering into several pieces on the unforgiving stone floor. The sound of the breaking china echoed through the otherwise silent kitchen, a sharp punctuation mark that shattered the fragile piece. Almost immediately, Eleanor Whitmore appeared at the doorway, her elegant silhouette framed against the fading light of the hallway. Her expression, initially one of mild annoyance, quickly morphed into a mask of icy fury as her gaze fell upon the broken fragments at Martha's feet. Eleanor was a woman who cultivated an image of sophistication and philanthropy. She was known for her charitable donations and her seemingly gracious demeanor at social events. However, behind the carefully constructed facade lay a woman of considerable arrogance and a deeply ingrained disdain for those she considered to be of a lower social standing, particularly her household staff. Martha, Eleanor's voice, usually modulated and refined, now cracked with a shrill edge of anger. What in heaven's name have you done? That was a royal Doulton, a piece from a very valuable set. Martha's heart sank. She had always been meticulous in her work, acutely aware of the value of Eleanor's possessions. This accident, though unintentional, filled her with immediate remorse and a familiar sense of dread. She looked up at Eleanor, her eyes filled with apology. "I am so sorry, Madam Whitmore. It was an accident. My hand just slipped." Eleanor's lips curled into a contemptuous sneer. She stepped further into the kitchen, her expensive Italian leather shoes clicking sharply on the marble. She surveyed the broken pieces with an air of theatrical dismay. "An accident? Really, Martha? This is becoming a habit. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if you even possess the basic level of competence required for this job." Her words were laced with condescension, each syllable a subtle jab designed to belittle and demean. Martha remained silent, her gaze fixed on the shattered remains of the teacup. She had endured countless such verbal barbs over the years. She had learned that arguing or attempting to offer excuses only served to further inflame Eleanor's temper. Her strategy was always one of quiet resignation, of absorbing the insults and carrying on with her work. It was a shield she had built over time, a necessary defense against the constant barrage of Eleanor's disdain. "You know," Eleanor continued, her voice dropping to a tone of cold, calculated cruelty. Sometimes I think you people are simply incapable of appreciating nice things. You're clumsy, you're careless, and you have absolutely no respect for the property of others. She paused, allowing her words to hang in the air, each one a deliberate infliction of pain. Honestly, Martha, you are just a servant. Don't ever expect anything more. The words, though familiar, still stung. Martha felt a familiar ache in her chest, a dull throb of humiliation. She swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to well up in her eyes. She knew that Eleanor thrived on such displays of power, on making her feel small and insignificant. To show any sign of weakness would only embolden her further. Eleanor watched Martha's silent suffering with a sense of cold satisfaction. She enjoyed these moments, these reminders of her own superior status. In her mind, people like Martha were simply cogs in her well-oiled machine, necessary but ultimately disposable. She often told herself that her harshness was a form of discipline, a way to ensure that her staff remained diligent and obedient. But in reality, it was rooted in a deep-seated sense of superiority and a profound lack of empathy. With a dismissive wave of her hand, Eleanor gestured towards the broken china. Just clean it up, and be careful this time. I don't want any more of my valuable possessions ending up in the dustbin because of your incompetence. She then turned and swept out of the kitchen, leaving Martha alone with the shattered teacup and the heavy weight of her disdain. Martha knelt down slowly, her aging knees protesting slightly. She carefully gathered the sharp fragments, her calloused fingers working with practiced precision. As she swept the pieces into a dustpan, her mind drifted to her son, Thomas. He was a world away now, successful and independent. She rarely spoke of him to Eleanor, knowing that it would only invite further scorn. Eleanor's world was one of privilege and inherited wealth, a world far removed from the struggles and sacrifices Martha had made to raise her son. Martha had carried a secret for many years, a secret that had shaped her life and her decisions. She had chosen this path, this life of service, for reasons that were deeply personal and complex. She had endured the indignities and the constant belittling with a quiet resilience, always holding on to the hope that one day things would be different. She found solace in her work ethic and in the knowledge that she had always tried her best, despite the circumstances. As she finished cleaning up the last of the broken china, Martha let out a long, silent sigh. The incident with the teacup was just another small reminder of her place in Eleanor's world, a world where she was seen as nothing more than a dispensable servant. But deep down, beneath the layers of humility and resignation, a spark of quiet dignity still flickered, a testament to the strength of her spirit and the enduring power of a mother's love. Little did Eleanor know that the woman she so readily dismissed held a connection to a future that would ultimately shatter her carefully constructed world of privilege and expose the true cost of her relentless contempt. The afternoon sun continued its descent, casting longer shadows across the kitchen, a silent witness to the simmering tensions and the unspoken truths that lay beneath the surface of the seemingly perfect household. The remainder of the afternoon passed with a heavy silence in the Whitmore residence. Martha continued her tasks, her movements more deliberate than usual, the image of the shattered teacup and Eleanor's cutting words replaying in her mind. She meticulously cleaned the silver, polished the already gleaming furniture, and prepared dinner, her hands moving almost automatically. Eleanor remained in her study, the closed door a silent barrier between them. Martha knew that the incident was likely not forgotten, and she braced herself for further reprimands, perhaps even a deduction from her already meager wages. As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn outside, the telephone in the hallway rang. Martha, who was tidying up the living room, paused and listened as the housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, answered it. She heard Mrs. Gable's muffled tones, and then the housekeeper's voice, slightly raised, calling out, "Martha, it's for you. A Mr. Johnson." Martha frowned. She rarely received phone calls. Her only living relative was her son, Thomas, and he usually communicated through letters or occasionally a brief call to Mrs. Gable if he needed to reach her urgently. A Mr. Johnson. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't immediately place it. With a sense of unease, she wiped her hands on her apron and went to the hallway. Mrs. Gable handed her the receiver, her expression a mixture of curiosity and slight suspicion. Martha took it, her heart beating a little faster than usual. "Hello?" she said hesitantly. A warm, professional voice responded on the other end. "Good evening, Mrs. Johnson. My name is Mr. Davies, and I am the personal assistant to Mr. Thomas Johnson. Mr. Johnson has requested that I extend a formal invitation to you to attend a private dinner reception hosted by the Sterling Group this coming Saturday evening." Martha's hand trembled slightly as she held the phone. The Sterling Group? That was a name she had seen in the newspapers, associated with immense wealth and power. Why would someone from such a prestigious organization be inviting her, a simple housekeeper, to a dinner reception? I think there must be some mistake," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know any Mr. Thomas Johnson from the Sterling Group." Mr. Davies' voice remained calm and reassuring. "There is no mistake, Mrs. Johnson. Mr. Johnson specifically requested your presence. The reception will be held at the Grand Ballroom of the Regency Hotel at 7 o'clock. A car will be sent to collect you at 6:30. He paused for a moment. "Mr. Johnson mentioned that you might know him by another name? Perhaps Tommy?" A wave of dizziness washed over Martha. Tommy. That was the nickname she had used for her son when he was a little boy. Could it be? After all these years? The possibility seemed too incredible to be true. A fragile dream that she dared not fully embrace. "Tommy?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "My Tommy?" "Yes, Mrs. Johnson," Mr. Davies confirmed gently. "Mr. Thomas Johnson is your son." Martha's knees almost buckled. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. After all these years of believing him to be gone, or at least unreachable, he had found her. And he was a Mr. Thomas Johnson of the Sterling Group? It was beyond anything she could have ever imagined. Despite the overwhelming joy and surprise, a flicker of apprehension also surfaced. Why now? Why after so long? And why such a grand invitation? She voiced her concerns to Mr. Davies, her voice still trembling. But why a dinner reception? Why not just a private meeting? Mr. Davies explained that Mr. Johnson had a significant announcement to make and that he wished for his mother to be present. He assured her that all arrangements would be made for her comfort and that Mr. Johnson was very much looking forward to seeing her again. Over the next few days, Martha was in a state of quiet turmoil. The news of her son's success and his desire to reconnect filled her with immense happiness. But she also felt a sense of unease about the circumstances. She kept the invitation a secret from Eleanor, unsure of how her employer would react. The thought of attending such a grand event was also daunting for her, a woman who had spent most of her life in the shadows. However, the longing to see her son again, for years, after circumstances had cruelly separated her from her young son, Tommy. Martha had carried a heavy heart, unsure of his fate. She had tried, in her own limited way, to find him, but without resources or connections, her efforts had been futile. Time had marched on, and the little boy she remembered had faded into a cherished but distant memory. Unbeknownst to Martha, Thomas had never given up hope of finding his mother. As he rose through the ranks of the business world, his success only amplified the void left by her absence. He had hired numerous private investigators over the years, providing them with every scrap of information he could recall from his childhood. The search had been long and often frustrating, with many dead ends and false leads. Finally, a breakthrough came through a tenacious investigator who managed to trace Martha to the Whitmore estate. Thomas was overjoyed but also cautious. He wanted to be absolutely certain before approaching her directly. He instructed his assistant, Mr. Davies, to proceed delicately. A few days after the initial phone call, Martha received another call from Mr. Davies. This time, he explained that Mr. Johnson understood it had been a long time since she had last seen her son, who she knew as Tommy. To help her recognize him, Mr. Davies offered to send her a recent photograph of Mr. Johnson. Martha's heart leaped at the offer. She provided an email address that belonged to a kind neighbor who occasionally allowed her to use their computer. Later that day, Martha nervously checked her neighbor's email. There it was, an email from Mr. Davies with an attachment. Her hands trembled as she clicked on the image. The photograph showed a distinguished-looking man with kind eyes and a warm smile. He looked so different from the little boy she remembered, yet there was something undeniably familiar in his gaze, a certain set to his jaw that brought tears to her eyes. It was Tommy, her Tommy, grown up and successful. The invitation to the dinner reception now made more sense. Thomas, wanting to reconnect with her in a meaningful way, had chosen this occasion. The grand setting still intimidated her, but the thought of seeing her son again, of finally bridging the gap of all those lost years, filled her with a nervous excitement. She carefully folded the printed photograph and tucked it safely into her pocket, a tangible piece of the past and a hopeful glimpse into the future. She decided she would attend the reception, her heart filled with anticipation and a touch of trepidation. Saturday evening arrived, and a sleek black car pulled up to the gates of the Whitmore estate. Martha, dressed in the most presentable outfit she owned, a simple but elegant dress that Mrs. Gable had helped her choose, felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she stepped into the car. The drive to the Regency Hotel seemed to pass in a blur. The grand ballroom was a spectacle of opulence. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, casting a warm glow on the elegantly dressed guests mingling amidst tables laden with exquisite food and flowing champagne. Martha felt a pang of self-consciousness as she entered, her simple attire standing in stark contrast to the designer gowns and tailored suits around her. She tried to remain inconspicuous, hoping to find her son without drawing too much attention to herself. Eleanor Whitmore arrived shortly after, a vision in a shimmering emerald gown, her demeanor radiating confidence and social grace. She immediately began to circulate among the guests, engaging in animated conversations and making connections with the city's elite. She was completely unaware of Martha's presence, her focus solely on furthering her own social and professional standing. As Martha stood near a wall, observing the scene with a sense of bewildered awe, she noticed Eleanor gesturing imperiously towards a young waiter who was passing by with a tray of drinks. "You there?" Eleanor called out, her voice carrying a sharp edge even amidst the general murmur of conversation. "Champagne," and make it snappy. Martha, who was standing nearby, instinctively turned towards the sound of Eleanor's voice. She watched as the young waiter, slightly flustered by Eleanor's tone, fumbled with the bottle. Before he could pour the drink, Eleanor's gaze fell upon Martha, and her expression instantly hardened with a mixture of surprise and displeasure. Martha! Eleanor's voice was laced with disbelief and a hint of disdain. What are you doing here? I didn't realize they allowed the help to mingle with the guests at these affairs. Her words were spoken loud enough to draw the attention of a few nearby individuals, who turned to look with curiosity. Martha felt a flush of embarrassment rise to her cheeks. She had hoped to avoid Eleanor until she had a chance to speak with Thomas. "Madam Whitmore," she began, her voice barely audible. I was invited." Eleanor's laughter was sharp and brittle. "Invited? Don't be ridiculous, Martha. Who in their right mind would invite a housekeeper to a gathering like this?" She looked around at the onlookers with a condescending smile. "Clearly, there's been some sort of mistake." She then turned back to Martha, her eyes narrowed. "I think it's best if you just leave. I wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable." The thinly veiled insult hung in the air. Before Martha could respond, Eleanor raised her voice slightly, intending to summon a member of the hotel staff. "Excuse me," she called out, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Could someone please escort this woman out? She seems to have wandered in by mistake." Just as Eleanor was about to secure the attention of a passing staff member, a deep, resonant voice cut through the surrounding conversations. "Excuse me, Mrs. Whitmore, but I believe you are mistaken." All heads turned towards the speaker, a distinguished-looking man in a perfectly tailored suit who was approaching them with an air of quiet authority. It was Thomas Johnson. He walked directly towards Martha, his eyes filled with concern. "Mother," he said, his voice warm and genuine as he reached out and gently took her hand. "Are you all right?" Martha looked up at her son, tears welling up in her eyes once more. She squeezed his hand tightly, a wave of relief and overwhelming emotion washing over her. "Tommy," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "My Tommy." Thomas turned his gaze back to Eleanor, his expression now devoid of any warmth. His eyes, which had been filled with affection just moments before, now held a cold, steely glint. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice firm and carrying throughout the now hushed ballroom. "Perhaps you don't recognize me, but this woman, the help, as you so eloquently put it, is my mother." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Eleanor's face drained of all color. Her carefully constructed composure finally cracked, replaced by a look of utter shock and disbelief. The realization of who Martha truly was, and the implications for her own standing, hit her with the force of a physical blow. The murmurs among the guests grew louder, a mixture of surprise, intrigue, and perhaps even a hint of schadenfreude. The carefully orchestrated elegance of the evening had been shattered by this unexpected and dramatic revelation. The stunned silence in the grand ballroom was almost palpable. Guests, who had moments before been engaged in lively conversations and networking, now stood frozen, their eyes fixed on Eleanor Whitmore and the powerful man who had just revealed his connection to her seemingly insignificant housekeeper. Eleanor's face, once radiating confidence, was now a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. She stammered, trying to find the words to deny or downplay the revelation, but the shock had rendered her momentarily speechless. Thomas maintained his firm grip on Martha's hand, his gaze unwavering as he looked at Eleanor. The warmth that had filled his eyes when he looked at his mother was completely absent now, replaced by a cold resolve. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the dramatic revelation hanging heavy in the opulent space. Eleanor finally found her voice, though it was shaky and laced with a desperate attempt at damage control. "Thomas, Mr. Johnson," she began, forcing a strained smile. "There seems to be some misunderstanding. Martha has been a valued member of my household for many years, like family in a way." Her words sounded hollow and unconvincing, especially to those who had overheard her earlier condescending remarks to the waiter and Martha herself. Thomas's expression remained impassive. "Valued, Mrs. Whitmore? Your treatment of my mother just moments ago, and the information I have gathered through my own investigation, paints a very different picture of your valuation. I have learned a great deal about the way you conduct yourself and the disdain you hold for those you deem to be in service positions." His voice, though calm, carried an undeniable weight of authority that silenced any potential interjections. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd as guests exchanged knowing glances. Eleanor's reputation for being a demanding employer was not entirely unknown within their social circle, though the extent of her behavior towards Martha was likely a surprise to many. Eleanor pressed on, her voice taking on a more pleading tone. "But Thomas, surely you understand that in business we all have roles to play. Martha, she is a wonderful woman, of course, but our relationship is purely professional." She attempted to laugh lightly, but the sound fell flat in the tense atmosphere. "This shouldn't affect our potential partnership. The Sterling Group's collaboration with Whitmore Restaurants would be mutually beneficial, a significant step forward for both our organizations." Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore, my principles are not for sale. Witnessing your condescending behavior towards my mother tonight has only confirmed what my investigators have already uncovered about your character. I cannot, in good conscience, align myself or my company with someone who treats others with such blatant disregard and contempt. My mother's well-being and dignity are worth far more to me than any potential profit." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, making it clear that his decision was final. "Therefore, I regret to inform you that any discussions regarding a partnership between Sterling Group and Whitmore Restaurants are terminated, effective immediately." The finality of his words hung in the air like a death knell for Eleanor's aspirations. The opportunity she had so eagerly sought, the chance to elevate her business and her social standing, had vanished in an instant, shattered by the very person she had so readily dismissed. Eleanor stood as if rooted to the spot, her face pale and her eyes wide with disbelief. The humiliation was palpable. She could feel the weight of the gazes upon her, the whispers that were undoubtedly circulating through the room. Without another word, she turned abruptly and walked away, her emerald gown swishing behind her as she made a hasty and undignified exit from the grand ballroom. The drive back to her mansion was a blur of shock and disbelief. Eleanor sat in the back of the limousine, the opulent surroundings now feeling cold and empty. The city lights outside seemed to mock her, their brilliance a stark contrast to the darkness that was beginning to engulf her. As she stepped into the silent foyer of her vast home, the emptiness seemed to echo her inner turmoil. The grandeur that had once been a source of pride now felt like a suffocating weight. She wandered through the deserted rooms, the silence amplifying the sting of Thomas's words and the shame of her public humiliation. Alone in her study, surrounded by the trappings of her wealth, Eleanor finally allowed herself to confront the reality of the situation. The partnership with Sterling Group was gone, her reputation was tarnished, and perhaps most devastatingly, she was forced to acknowledge the deep flaws in her own character. She thought of Martha, of the years of subtle and not-so-subtle cruelty she had inflicted upon her. She remembered the sharp words, the dismissive gestures, the way she had consistently made Martha feel inferior. And now, the consequences of her actions had come crashing down upon her with unexpected force. The isolation she felt was profound, a direct result of the way she had chosen to treat those around her. For the first time, Eleanor began to truly understand the meaning of the proverb, "What goes around, comes around." Back at the Regency Hotel after Eleanor's hasty departure, the atmosphere gradually began to normalize, though a buzz of conversation about the dramatic events still filled the air. Thomas turned his attention fully to his mother, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and deep affection. "Mother," he said softly, his grip on her hand tightening. "Are you truly all right? She didn't hurt you, did she?" Martha smiled gently, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and made her look years younger. "I'm all right, Tommy," she said, using his childhood nickname, a warmth spreading through her at the sound of it on her lips again. "I've endured worse. The important thing is that I've found you." Thomas embraced his mother, holding her close after so many years of separation. Tears streamed down both their faces, tears of joy, relief, and the bittersweet recognition of the time they had lost. Later, as they sat together in a quieter part of the hotel, Thomas explained his long search for her and his joy at finally finding her. He reiterated his regret for not knowing about the way Eleanor had treated her, mentioning both the investigators' findings and what he had personally witnessed that evening. He again offered to take her away from that environment immediately. Martha, though touched by her son's offer, remained thoughtful. She had lived a life of quiet independence for so long, and the idea of suddenly stepping into a world of wealth and privilege felt somewhat daunting. She told Thomas that she needed some time to consider her future, but she assured him that she was incredibly grateful for his love and support. While Martha contemplated her next steps, the news of the dramatic confrontation at the Sterling Group reception spread like wildfire through the city's social circles. Eleanor Whitmore, the once respected businesswoman, became the subject of gossip and speculation. Her reputation suffered a significant blow, and the cancellation of the lucrative partnership with Sterling Group had a considerable impact on her business. Many who had once courted her favor now kept their distance, unwilling to associate with someone who had been publicly exposed for such callous behavior. Martha, on the other hand, found herself embraced by her son's love and support. Thomas ensured she had everything she needed and respected her wishes for time and space to adjust to their reunion. He made it clear that her well-being was his priority. The story of Eleanor Whitmore and Martha Johnson serves as a poignant reminder that true wealth lies not in material possessions or social standing, but in the richness of one's character and the respect one shows to others. Eleanor's arrogance and contempt ultimately led to her downfall, demonstrating that the seeds of negativity will inevitably yield a bitter harvest. Martha's quiet dignity and resilience, despite the hardships she faced, ultimately paved the way for her reunion with her son and a new chapter in her life. The scales of justice, though sometimes delayed, eventually find their balance. The way we treat others truly reflects the content of our own hearts, and in the end, it is our character, not our possessions, that defines our true worth. What we sow, we shall ultimately reap. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed this narrative of unexpected consequences and the triumph of human dignity, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more compelling stories. We have a wide range of tales exploring the complexities of human nature and the intricate tapestry of life.